All right, folks, hour number 2 of the Friday edition of the Steve Malzberg Show. Glad you're aboard. Last week, I think it was last week, I'm all confused, we had the ruling from a federal court on the NSA surveillance program, calling it probably unconstitutional. Larry Klayman won his case in that court. And then today, just moments before we took the air, a federal court in New York has ruled that, guess what? It is not only constitutional and legal, but it's necessary. So we have two courts that I believe are on equal footing, ruling very much polar opposites, as we'll discuss right now with our friend Paul Callan, CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor and now a defense attorney. Glad to see you.
Nice
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. All right, so almost everything the judge said in the previous ruling, this judge goes to the opposite extent, correct?
It's interesting, and you rarely see federal judges like that. Sometimes there's one decision might be a little bit different than the other.
Variation.
Yeah, but they're polar opposites, absolutely opposite. Matter of fact, this New York judge, his name is Judge William Pauley.
Yes, the third.
The third,
yes.
Says basically that
in a case brought by the ACLU, we should point out.
That's right, against the NSA on the issue that they shouldn't be collecting all of this telephone metadata, as it's called. Now, the metadata is they're not listening in on what you say in a telephone conversation, but they can tell by looking at Verizon records who you called and who called you, and that gives them hints about whether you're communicating with terrorists. So this judge says this is not a violation of the privacy rights of American citizens, and he says, I love this wording, he says the Bill of Rights is not a suicide pact. The decision very forceful in describing 9/11 and the tragedy that was for America, and saying there's only one way we can protect ourselves from terrorists, and that's by having good intelligence.
Yeah, he says as the September 11th attacks demonstrate, the costs of missing such a thread, talking about all that information, can be horrific. Technology allowed al-Qaeda to operate decentralized and plot international terrorist attacks remotely. The bulky telephone metadata collection program represents the government's counterpunch, connecting fragmented and fleeting communications to reconstruct and eliminate al-Qaeda's terror network. Whereas the other decision went totally the other way and talked about how this was a violation of the Fourth Amendment and unconstitutional, and the government showed no reason how this helps to prevent terrorist attacks. And so, interesting, you pointed out that this judge was appointed by
President Clinton,
and this judge ruled in favor of NSA, and the judge previously was appointed by
President Bush.
Yeah,
that's
so you never know.
No, it's very, very hard to predict what judges will do when they get named to the bench. And you have to say also, Steve, that this whole issue of privacy rights of American citizens, it doesn't cut clearly along ideological lines. I mean, I don't think you can say conservatives would necessarily be on one side of this and liberals on the other.
Yeah.
Because even conservatives believe that Americans have privacy rights, and conservatives are very suspicious of big government, and that sort of meshes with a lot of liberal suspicion. I mean, liberals like the government to pay unemployment benefits and that sort of thing, but they're not too much in favor of government spying either.
No. All right. So what does this mean for the NSA going forward when two courts of equal footing, if you will, or same value to the layman, rule in completely different ways? I mean, this is just further proof that this is going to have to come before the Supreme Court? Well,
probably it's going to wind up in front of the Supreme Court.
Immediately. I should have asked the question. What does it mean immediately? Because the other judge did not put any kind of regulation on the or make them stop the NSA pending an appeal by the government. Here, the government wins. So does this affect that would the government now have to appeal that other ruling or not?
Well, the government will be appealing the other ruling, and that federal judge was in Washington, D.C., and he said, you know, the funny thing about it is he said, the case against the government is so strong that I'm going to grant a preliminary injunction. In other words, I'm going to say you have won the lawsuit already, and I'm going to give you the relief because it's so clear-cut that you're going to win. This judge, on the other hand, says, not only do I disagree with that, you don't deserve a preliminary injunction, I'm dismissing this case outright because it's so weak it doesn't even deserve to be on my docket. So talk about opposite ends of the spectrum. What happens next? Well, what you're going to see is is one or both of these cases will wind up going up on appeal to what's called the circuit court, and that's the intermediate court on the way to the Supreme Court. Now, if all of the circuit courts agree that this is either legal or illegal, the Supreme Court would never have to look at it. But usually what happens is some of the circuits will rule one way and others will rule another way, and then the Supreme Court has to resolve it. But right now, I got to say, the government's been winning in these cases. You know, that decision from last week shocked everybody, because for the first time, a federal judge said, hey, this is wrong what's going on. Because you have to remember that we have this secret FISA court that exists, this intelligence court. All of those judges have ruled in favor of the government. And as a general rule, federal judges kind of leave the feds alone when we're dealing with foreign intelligence issues. So it was kind of surprising that Judge Leon went against the government.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so we'll have to wait and see what happens here. Let's quickly touch on, we're talking to Paul Callan, CNN legal analyst, former prosecutor, now defense attorney, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. The Justice Department waited until, in my view, they found a white perpetrator of this knockout game. And don't get me wrong, this guy should rot in prison for as long as possible under the law. He attacked, not only did he attack another human being, he did it for racial reasons, and he did it to a 78-year-old man, I think it was.
79, yeah.
79. I mean, just horrific. But there have been instances, even again yesterday in Midwood, Brooklyn again, of black-on-white knockout games or crimes or whatever, and I've never heard boo, excuse me, from the Justice Department. Tell me about why you think they made an example of Texas, and what does that mean for going forward?
Well, it's a bit of a head-scratcher on that issue, and I'll tell you why. As far as I can tell, this is the first time that the feds have used this federal hate law in one of these knockout game cases. I mean, I looked hard. I haven't been able to find another one. So then you have to say, well, why would the federal government, of all the cases in America, and there are a lot of them, as you've said, why do they pick the one in Texas? So I'm thinking, well, maybe Texas must have a very lenient law system there. Maybe they have no hate crime legislation in Texas.
So they come federally.
Yeah, well, you want to know something?
That's not true.
No. Governor Perry signed such a law in 2001, and it's very strict. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, it's stricter than the federal law.
Oh, wow.
He'd face more time under Texas law than he does from the feds.
Right.
So now you got to say,
why
are they picking this? Now, obviously, you could say that they're trying to clearly establish that this is not racism by African Americans directed against white victims, because, as has been the case in some of the other cases, the New York cases. They want to demonstrate that because you have an African American victim here and the defendant is white, that all races engage in racial hatred, and we're going to go after this Texas case. Why do they do that? I think, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, all right? So I happen to think you got a local federal prosecutor in Texas, and he's looking at this case, and it's a clear-cut case. The defendant said, I want to get a black guy because I'll be on national television.
That's what he said, yes.
Well, he's on national television,
yes, that's what he said.
And I think he's going to wind up, watching television
or
from the inside of a prison cell.
Or let's see if it gets on national television. He wanted to see if
That's
it would,
right. That's right. And so it's an easy case for the prosecutor to prove. And I think you got a local prosecutor, and he knows this will be a big case nationwide, so he picks it out. I don't think that Eric Holder is sitting in his mahogany paneled office saying, let's get a case with a white guy going after a black guy. I can't buy it. I see the theory, but I don't believe it.
And I respect that opinion, but I disagree with you.
Okay.
I think it was picked out purposely because of the race, black on white, white on black. He had ample chance to go the other way and didn't. Anyway, Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year to you.
We'll watch you on CNN, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Paul Callan, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, Noah Rothman, editor and columnist for Mediaite.com, will join us. We have a lot of stories. And then we go right to Malzberg's Media Madness with the one and only Noel Shepard, the associate editor of Newsbusters.org. We also have Eleanor Clift still ahead, Mike Baker to talk about the al-Qaeda captive who wants out. Steve Malzberg Show, right here on Newsmax TV and radio.